After a whole year and some months of living off of Geshu Lin crumbs, ladies, lads, we're all still waiting. So, to help cope with the wait, I want to talk about him. I just want to devote one video to brain dump anything and everything about him, because I love him. After that Jian video, I was never the same. There's plenty of absolutely bussin' ladies in WuWa, but sometimes we just want a badass, hot dude. And that's Geshu Lin. I swear I've been struggling to keep this man out of my mouth for the past year. His name, by the way, not his death. Is he gonna be playable? Was he a bad general? Why the fuck was he so obsessed with winning? Could he be the next Thenodian Resonator? I'll be covering these kinds of topics and more. So yes, this is a speculations and theories kind of video, which is a first on the channel, but hey, the main point is, I get to talk about him, and that's all I want. Yes! Also, since this is a theory and speculations video, it's very possible I'm wrong on everything. A lot of the things I'm saying in this video, I probably made the fuck up. So just go into this with the mindset of some food for thought, you know, nothing deep. Also, happy first anniversary to Wuthering Waves, because I suspect Past Me has planned the timing of this video's release to coincide with the game's first birthday. So happy birthday, WuWa!
Happy birthday to you.
Now, if you're new here, or don't recall who this sleep-deprived, scarred-up beefcake of a hottie is, let me enlighten you. Geshu Lin was the previous general of the Midnight Rangers, with his last known battle being the battle beneath the Crescent. One of his strongest defining traits is in his desire to achieve victory, no matter the cost. So, if getting the dub means sacrificing, and I quote, tens, hundreds, thousands of his men, so be it. But count himself as part of those sacrifices, because he's also the type of general that'll fight on the front lines with his men. Because if you want something done right, you do it yourself. And if Geshu Lin wants that dub, he'll see to it personally. This is actually a significant feat, because historically, generals of the Midnight Rangers often led from behind enemy lines. Bunch of pussies they were, but Geshu Lin, he broke that trend by fighting with his men on the battlefield. He could have resided in the safety of the Rangers' camp, ordering whatever he wanted away from the mortal danger of his decisions, but no. Geshu Lin chooses to fight out there and lead his men by example. I mean, the guy's model is scarred up, and his left hand's all bandaged up too. He's been through the trenches for sure, but I'm betting for every scar he got, that's a tacit Discord army destroyed, because as a fighter, this guy cleaned up the battlefields. I mean, in the opening of the game, dude is literally on top of a pile of dead tacit Discords, probably destroyed them all himself with his forte. His forte, I'm pretty sure, being his black flames, which I quote, is a powerful resonance ability. I know it's not confirmed, but the amount of times they've referenced his infernal abilities in the storyteller's cutscene, surely that's his resonance ability. Furthermore, when he sacrificed his body to the black flames for power, that sounds like a resonator amplifying their forte to overclock. So I'm sure the black flames gotta be his resonance ability. Speaking of his flames, yeah, they're just flames with Black Air Force's energy. It'll not only burn you, but it'll burn your very existence. Probably. We don't know what his flames do specifically, but I think it's reasonable to assume the darker the flame, the more powerful it is. Think about all the anime you've watched which followed that rule. And I'm betting you he's overclocked more than once, because overclocking can lead to permanent mutations in appearance. And here, you can see his mutated right arm. Dude doesn't have a right arm overall for fashion. That's hiding something demonic. Yeah, some things just can't handle Geshu Lin's forte firepower, be it tacit discords, or maybe even his own weapon. I mean, just look at it. The energy pulsating within it appears to be cracking open the blade's steel, and the chains are there just to desperately keep the sword together from breaking apart. Geshu Lin's power is probably that potent, so it's no wonder why whenever he was on the front lines, victory seemed certain. Unfortunately, things were not so certain come the battle beneath the Crescent. Whilst there were red flags identified with the surrounding environment, to quote his troops, this was their last chance at organizing another attack. An attack at the enemy they've been yearning to destroy, Overthrax, the Thenodian of war. So, Geshu Lin chose to go for the kill. But when the Retroact Rain started to calm down and started hitting the fan because soldiers couldn't tell who was friend or enemy, it was Geshu Lin who ordered everyone to stay on business and keep fighting. To quote him, no retreat, it's fight or die. And so, in overclocking, I'm pretty sure, Geshu Lin gravely injured Overthrax, forcing the Thenodian to retreat back into the seas. No sentinel needed, he owned that shit. And that was that. He was never seen again after. As for his legacy, it mainly wasn't good. A lot of people, not just in Jinzhou, but all of Huanglong, saw him as the general that led numerous lives to their deaths. But some argued that if not for him, Jinzhou could have fallen that day. And with that all being said and done, that's your Geshu Lin lore covered. Now let's talk topics. Do I think Geshu Lin will be playable? Yes. Yes, he will be. From the first second of this video, I literally imply that he will be playable eventually. There is no ifs to this. I am certain he will be playable, because at the end of the day, Kuro Games is still a business, and making Geshu Lin playable is a business decision that has exponential profits and near zero risks. I do not think Kuro Games wants to be the company that performs the financial fumble of the lifetime. Come on. To expand on the value of Geshu Lin to Wuthering Waves, let's actually highlight the details. Geshu Lin's model and weapon design are already made, and the fans love it, especially the face card. Fuck me, that's a hot man. The only thing that they'll probably need to create is that demonic arm of his. But honestly, with WuWa's track record of cool designs, it'll be fine. Furthermore, Geshu Lin is also a male character, and with the problematic gender ratio currently plaguing the game, hopefully it will be addressed come the later patches, releasing Geshu Lin will help alleviate this issue. Furthermore, gals and guys both want this man. Everyone wants this man, so Kuro Games should not have to fear turning players away from the game by releasing him. Lastly, and I'm a broken clockwork when I say this, everyone loves him, which I'm repeating, but I just want to emphasize that point. The demand for this man is so undeniable, you'd have to be blind to miss it. Even deaf. Just go on X and find a post that theorizes any upcoming male resonators, and you're very likely to find replies wanting Geshu Lin. Just the mere phenomena of gaining explosive popularity from appearing in someone else's resonator showcase should already be enough to prove that Geshu Lin is a character that players have immense interest in. You cannot deny the value that this man will bring to the game, and I am certain Kuro Games knows this, hence why I'm so convinced they'll make him playable. And for the extra cherry on top, the character of Geshu Lin has been in consideration since the very early days of Wuthering Waves' development. Just check this leaked concept art from way back. See our man's on the left? And his base design has not changed much since then either. It's as if he's already a perfectly designed character in Kuro Games' eyes, and now Kuro Games just needs to make him playable. And when he is playable, I wonder what it'll look like. Obviously, I can't theorize the specific actions of his moveset, but I can have a bit of a guess towards the high level stuff, such as kit and style. Kit wise, I suspect Geshu Lin will most likely be a broadsword Havoc user. Not much thinking involved here. Dude wields a big sword with dark fiery powers. Very on the nose analysis. But it's also possible he could be a fusion resonator too, though I have some doubts because Brant's already got that purple fire motif. Besides, the element of Havoc you could do a lot with. Who says Havoc can't take the form of fire? It's been associated with plants and jellyfishes, so I don't think fire is all too crazy. Now in terms of what his actual moveset could look like, I actually might have an idea. Considering that WuWa often takes inspiration from Punishing Grey Ravens, Kuro Games' other successful gacha title, I think referencing a character's moveset from there could serve as a reasonable basis for what we could expect with Geshu Lin. And from Punishing Grey Ravens, there's really only two characters that come to mind. Oh, technically one based on the lore, but anyway. Kamui and Kamu. Both these guys wield a broadsword with dark aura, and Geshu Lin is most likely WuWa's Kamui and Kamu. Now as for which of the two I think will be more like Geshu Lin's moveset, it could go either way. It definitely depends on how Kuro Games develops him. A core difference between Kamu and Kamui's fighting style is in its humanity, which is weird to say, but let me cook. Kamu's style definitely feels more beast-like than Kamui. If you look at their postures when fighting, Kamu is kinda arched down, whereas Kamui is upright. Furthermore, with Kamu's ultimate, he literally throws away his sword and primarily uses his claws to attack, which really resonates with that bestial feel of his moveset. Whereas with Kamui's ultimate, he simply envelops himself in a black energy that subsequently enhances his sword techniques. So, if Geshu Lin's playable character is similar to the guy we saw in Jian's trailer, his gameplay will most likely resemble Kamui's, even to the extent of his ultimate, because if you recall in the storyteller's cutscene, Geshu Lin sacrificed his body to the black flames for power, which kinda sounds similar to what Kamui was doing in his ultimate. But if Kuro Games decides to develop him in a way whereby he has, for some reason, become a bit more of a crazed berserker, maybe due to the influence of becoming a Threnodian resonator or something, then his gameplay will most likely resemble Kamu's. And if you recall, Geshu Lin's right arm does actually have some claws on it, so he could very well want to tear up his enemies with his own hands should he wish. Now if I had to say on which style I would prefer Geshu Lin to have, I'd like him to have a moveset that's more akin to Kamui's than Kamu. Main reason? I just like a guy who can use a broadsword well, I guess. I've always perceived Geshu Lin as being the type of guy who can effectively wield seismic amounts of power and not let it get to him. I mean, it's literally embodied in his design. A guy who can expertly swing a weapon that's nearly his whole size. Now that I've vouched for his eventual playability and theorized his gameplay aspects, let's see if I can gauge when Geshu Lin will come to Wuthering Waves. Honestly, I don't know, but I got a good feeling that he'll be released when we revisit Huanglong, which I am confident we will do eventually. Our time in Jinzhou was literally scratching the surface of this nation. There's so much we have yet to explore. Remember, there are more than 7 cities in this country, with each governed by its own sentinel. Huanglong is just a frat house of gods. Although, to be fair, each sentinel is just a part of the true sentinel, because Huanglong Sentinel divided itself up to govern each city. Anyhow, if there's any city we do go back to first, I suspect we'll go to the capital city, Mingting. Not only do more resonators have law connections there, namely Changli being a former secretary general there and Cantarella having an associate there, but it's also the capital. It really seems like the next place to go to in Huanglong. Ultimately, if we're ever heading back to Huanglong, I got a good feeling that's when Kuro Games will reintroduce Geshu Lin to the game. So as far as I know, we'll still need to wait for him unfortunately, but honestly, I'd rather this. Because Wuthering Waves was still finding its footing in 1.0, and the early patches of 2.0 don't really feel that relevant to Geshu Lin. If Kuro Games is going to do our man's justice, he needs to come out later. And whilst that means the agonizing wait continues, it's a necessary evil. Hunger is the best spice, and we've all seen what Kuro Games is capable of when they cook. So if a few kitchens need to be burnt down for my man to be represented exceptionally, let them burn. Because the former general at the Midnight Rangers who wounded a Threnodian single-handedly needs nothing less than perfection in his depiction. For example, remember Mighty's coronation as a demigod where his soldiers are chanting for him? Let me see some of that for our boy too. This is the man that strutted into Jian's trailer, threw hands, gaslit him, and then disappeared, only to completely steal the spotlight right off of him. The same guy that has only appeared in the game for around 10 minutes, yet still maintains a rabid fanbase. I am said fanbase. Fans of Geshu Lin, our time may not be nigh, but like the Midnight Rangers, we gotta stand strong for our general. And when people slander our mans, we gotta stand strong on that podium too. So for our next topic of conversation, I'm going to justify why I think Geshu Lin is just as good of a general as Jian. Although, before I even do that, I'd like to clarify one thing before we dive in. Potential flaw I could see people calling out with my entire speculation is that a lot of times I am referencing the Phantom Geshu Lin born from the Retroact Rain, which is an invalid data source because everything coming from it is probably fake. My response? Yeah, you could be totally right, but I speculate that not everything the hallucinations say or do are completely made up, since the hallucinations themselves are still illusions of past events. So when Jian is listening to Geshu Lin in that cutscene, I believe their conversation was a real conversation that took place, up until the part where Geshu Lin questions Jian's silence, because that's when the past Phantom is actually interacting with the present events, and thus, it's all fake from there. Further reinforcing this point is the fact that after Jian goes silent, the Phantom Geshu Lin then talks as if he already knows what the Retroact Rain is all about, which can't be the case because his first encounter with the Retroact Rain was also potentially his last. I bet the whole term Retroact Rain didn't even become a thing until after the battle too. At this point, it's just Jian's solutions being very intense. But whilst the words of the Phantom Geshu Lin may be completely inaccurate, I don't think the characterization is. And whilst it's mainly subjective, I believe there still could be some truths to how someone perceives another. Hence why I believe the Phantasmal Geshu Lin is still a valid source of reference when citing his character, intentions, and motivations. Now that I've clarified all that, let's finally talk why Geshu Lin is also a good general. In Huanglong's court of public opinion, most people see Geshu Lin as a complete tyrant compared to Jian. And I can't really refute them because the numerous evidence is there, buried 6 feet beneath. If we recount Jian's heroic deeds, his generous image is well deserved. He's the general that stepped up when all hope was lost during the battle beneath the Crescent. And he has consistently shown us that the lives of his comrades are at the forefront of his considerations, always. I bet he'd happily give up a tactical advantage if it meant some lives could be saved. He's even been explicit with Geshu Lin about his stances on how to lead, believing that they should never build their victory on top of endless sacrifices. His inherent need to save lives makes so much sense when you consider that he used to be a doctor too. Yes, before Jian was the Wind Rider who felled enemies with a spear and a longsword, because one weapon wasn't enough apparently, he was tending to the wounded. Dude really is the perfect specimen. A general who focused on saving his comrades versus a general who willingly doomed them. Obviously the former would be received better. But let me ask you, people of Huanglong, when Jian stepped up during the battle beneath the Crescent, where was Overthrax? Is it reasonable to assume that Jian's success is greatly attributed to the fact that there wasn't a Threnodian hounding him? A Threnodian that Geshu Lin successfully wounded to the point of fleeing? Did you ever consider that if not for Geshu Lin and his troops' final stand, Jinzhou might not be here anymore? Hell, all of Huanglong could have fallen? Remember in the Act of Patch 1.0 when the army of Tacit Discords reached Jinzhou? This is what happens if they fail to keep things in control at North 4 Barons. If you're not convinced, how about we track back a bit, when Geshu Lin was faced with the decision to either wait out the unusual rain or take that last chance to attack the Threnodian. We all know Geshu Lin chose to launch the assault under those strange conditions, which of course led to the many deaths he's so infamous for. But what if he didn't? perhaps if he listened to Jian, the Rangers could have fought under better conditions and thus won the battle with more people alive. That's probably what everyone was thinking. But entertain this. In waiting for the rain to stop, if it ever even stopped, because at that point no one knew what the Retroact Rain was, the number of Tesla discords grow exponentially, as does Overthrax's power. And in missing their chance to launch an organized attack, their next attempts are less effective, leading to even more deaths, and perhaps the Midnight Rangers ultimately failing to stop the Thenodian from reaching Jinzhou. I understand I've been spouting a lot of what ifs, and you're probably wondering, how do these even support Geshu Lin as a general? Well, it's because with Geshu Lin, his every decision prioritizes the defeat of the enemy immediately. Thus, he does not need to entertain the what-ifs that affect Jinzhou's future fatally. He would rather destroy the enemy now than risk more lives in the future being stolen. The quicker he can end the battles, the less frequently he'll have to gamble against death. This is one of the core reasons why I believe Geshu Lin too is a good general. Whilst Jian prioritizes saving his comrades' lives, which is good, he risks dragging out the battles too, which could lead to more deaths in the future. Geshu Lin, on the other hand, prioritizes ending the battle as quickly as he can so that there is less bloodshed in the future, even if it means sacrificing more of his men right now, a point I will certainly expand upon later in this video. Honestly, if things went differently, Jian could have totally become the hated one, the cowardly general whose loyalty to his troops costed the defense of Jinzhou's border, leading to countless dying. Maybe that's what Geshu Lin means when he says, two desperate souls destined to be forsaken. Anyhow, at the end of the day, both generals acted effectively, but in their own ways. Now, as to which was more viable, it's ultimately up to fate to determine, but you can't control fate. So what do? You make a decision. Analysis paralysis is objectively worse because it prevents progress, and whether it leads to better or worse outcomes, both Jian and Geshu Lin made choices with the intent to realize Jinzhou's safer future. Right, that was quite the ramble, but hopefully you get my point. Geshu Lin too was a good general, but I suspect I'll still need to defend my boy because I can predict a counter-argument going like this.
Okay, but what if Geshu Lin was just blindly charging at the enemy, ignoring strategy? Sure, he wanted to kill the enemy ASAP, but throwing soldiers at the enemy until they die is not the way to go.
And you're totally right. If that was indeed the case, which I don't think it is. During Jian's Retroact Rain sequence, you can literally overhear the NPCs talking about their strategy for the battle beneath the crescent. Ranged troopers snipe from above, and Geshu Lin leads the vanguard on foot. And I assume, as general, Geshu Lin has approved of these strat gems. Or maybe he left all the thinking to the other soldiers, I don't know. Another piece of evidence is when a Phantom Guard is talking with Jian about how this will be their last chance at organizing another attack. Note the word organizing, as if the attack must be done in a coordinated way. Yes, Geshu Lin wants to destroy the enemy first and foremost, but I strongly suspect he'd want to do so in the most effective way. If he didn't care about organizing an attack, then this conversation wouldn't be happening, and Geshu Lin would have already ordered soldiers to start fighting off-rip. And finally, when Geshu Lin's talking with Jian, you can see him acknowledging the unusual reins outlined by Jian, and even suggesting that his intuition could be right. He wasn't immediately dismissing Jian's input, nor was he having a dig at him for it. It was feedback he seemed to have valued. So clearly, Geshu Lin fights with strategy. That's why whenever people claim that Geshu Lin treats his troops as if they were expendables, I feel a little bit iffy. I mean, yes, from an outsider, it definitely looks like that. Geshu Lin is personally content with letting tens, hundreds, thousands die. But being expendable means being of relatively little significance, and therefore able to be abandoned or destroyed, just like a meat shield, for example. And I heavily doubt that Geshu Lin saw his troops as that, at all. Every troop sacrificed had a strategic purpose. Did you know that Geshu Lin also had non-resonators fighting on the front lines too? Yep, the Midnight Rangers consist of both non-resonators and resonators in their troops. The non-resonators could have made for the perfect meat shields, but no. Investment was had into the Huashu Academy to develop specialized weapons for them so that they could fight better on the front lines too. And lastly, if Geshu Lin was truly treating his soldiers in such a way, ain't no way Jian or the Midnight Rangers would even have a speck of respect for this man. From the dialogue, Jian seems to still respect Geshu Lin to some degree, and whilst the complaints of Geshu Lin's leadership came from the people of Huanglong, I have yet to see any of the Midnight Rangers themselves complain about Geshu Lin's leadership. So I really don't think Geshu Lin was a tyrant at all. And besides, I suspect he respects his troops too much to even do that, which is wild to even say considering how many he let die. But this next topic of conversation, I hope to unravel the big ultimatum surrounding Geshu Lin's character, his obsession with victory. I'm basically psychoanalyzing this dude at this point with nothing but my own intuition. So yes, my source is that I made it the fuck up. It's more like I'm making an educated guess. Anyway, why was our mans wanting to win so bad? My theory, well, given his dire circumstances, he had to be, or rather, that's what he came to be. I know that's not a proper answer, but I genuinely don't think there is a single reason. I simply believe that his natural desire to protect Jinzhou got bolstered up by 10,000 due to how desperate these battles were. If there's one character that immediately comes to mind when I think about Geshu Lin, it's Erwin Smith from Attack on Titan. Hell, I could link you to his wiki page and I'd be done with this discussion. But alas, you came to watch, not to read. So let me keep going. First, let's recognize the significance of being a general of the Midnight Rangers, especially in Geshu Lin's time. The main purpose of a military organization is for defense. This is what the Midnight Rangers are to Jinzhou, and the heads of such an organization are expected to uphold that responsibility. So, as general of the Midnight Rangers, the defense of Jinzhou falls on Geshu Lin to achieve, especially in times of war where the well-being of what they're defending is genuinely at risk. I don't know about you guys, but when there's a Thenodian that's actively around, all hands on deck, because losing a city or even an entire nation suddenly becomes a very real risk. And Geshu Lin's time as general took place during Overthax's prime. Remember, Thenodians are capable of vastly strengthening the effects of wave-worn phenomenon on their surrounding environment, which can include tacit discord outbreaks. So it's reasonable to say the battlefields he's had to lead must have been very rough compared to Gion's. We're talking peak Thenodian power and activity. Gion's battle with the Thenodian was literally just it coming back from sick leave. Gion doesn't have to worry about a full-blown Thenodian potentially destroying his home. Geshu Lin, however, did. And as general, if you are incompetent in your role, especially during such a volatile time, it's over. That'll be more blood on your hands than most others will ever see in their entire lifetime. Times 10. So yeah, being a general at the Midnight Rangers is a pretty hefty burden, and even more so when a Thenodian is invading. Next, let's acknowledge that Geshu Lin was pretty alone, or at least I believe he was quite isolated in terms of support, because when he was general, there was no magistrate in Jinzhou. To quote the storyteller, Jinzhou had been leaderless for years. So I suspect the general of the Midnight Rangers was the next best thing in terms of leaders that people could look to, which just adds even more pressure to the role. Or maybe there was some council running Jinzhou behind the scenes, I don't know. But at the very least, there was no proper magistrate in Jinzhou. Furthermore, there was no Sentinel Resonator, I haven't heard much from the other cities, and a lot of the WuWa 1.0 cast were too young to fight. I'd say the only people that could have been with Geshu Lin were either Motefi, Changli, Yinlin, Yuanwu, or even Yan. But realistically, it was probably only Yuanwu or Yan that could have done something. Motefi's a scientist, not a soldier. Changli was too busy being a secretary general in Mingting, and Yinlin was a patroller, not a soldier. Whilst Jian has plenty of connections he can go to, I think Geshu Lin had little to none, at least according to what we know about him now. So, being the top position of a military organization, fighting very tough battles with high casualties, with little to no help, what do you think that kind of pressure could do to the average person? Break them. I know in WuWa we're being tacit discords left and right, but you gotta remember, these things are actually dangerous. Thus, to ensure he was properly carrying out this monstrously unforgiving commitment, it was simply not enough for Geshu Lin to want to win. He had to devote everything and more to winning. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and in a battle as dire as this one, the significance of a victory is sky high. Because every day, when your city's life is at stake, when numerous brothers and sisters in arms fall in battle, when everything falls onto you and no one is coming to help, the only path out of this nightmare is victory. And you know what? Victory will not only safeguard Jinzhou, but it will also ensure every soul that is sacrificed is not in vain. If you look to his conversation with Jian, Geshu Lin questions him about their brethren, friends, comrades, who are viciously slain before their eyes, and asks Jian whether he will still remain silent when their souls demand an answer. It's like Geshu Lin's calling him out for that because this is something he himself will never do. Remain silent for the souls that have fallen in this battle. Geshu Lin will always respond to them with a win. And do you remember in Jian's trailer where Geshu Lin is asking him, do you truly deserve your title? How will you answer their dying pleas? Do you have an end to this eternal carnage? Geshu Lin has an answer to all three. He deserves his title as general because he will lead Jinzhou to victory. He answers his soldiers' dying pleas with victory and seeks to end the eternal carnage with victory. So with all things being considered, I think it's reasonable to see why Geshu Lin is so obsessed with victory. But when you hear it all, it sounds like a great tragedy has been wrought upon his character. Thus, I theorize that Geshu Lin is Jinzhou's tragic hero. The general who gave everything for Jinzhou, only for all of Huanglong to hate him. That's the tragedy associated with Geshu Lin, but I think we can really unravel the details of this. I argued that he gave up more than everything. To even possess such an inhuman devotion to winning, I believe Geshu Lin traded in some of his humanity. Now let's explore this. The Geshu Lin that we've seen is the product of these trades. At a high level, he's mostly a cold, hard individual. I say mostly because he can still have a bit of a laugh. For starters, people in Jinzhou mention how to achieve his strategic goal, he didn't even hesitate about sending people to their deaths. Emphasis on the lack of hesitation, because hesitation is time consuming, and those few seconds lost could be the difference between victory and defeat. Hell, we saw this during the climax of the battle beneath the crescent, when he ordered all troops to keep fighting. Furthermore, people said the troops he commanded were disciplined, although there is speculation that they obeyed him more out of fear than respect. To me, that just sounds like he cared more about maximizing their effectiveness in battle than making friends. Finally, when you look back on his conversation with Jian, Geshu Lin mentions how they must trample the pile of corpses at their feet and push on. Notice the lack of attachment to his fallen comrades? It's as if Geshu Lin's saying, okay, they're dead, but the battle continues, and that's what needs to end. When you consider all of these scenarios, it really sounds like Geshu Lin's discarded anything that could hinder his own effectiveness in battle or the effectiveness of his own troops. Because think about it, who do you think soldiers would more confidently fight for? A brave, fearless general who's able to maintain himself even when he's knee deep in bodies? Or a person who can't keep his cool under any inconvenience he meets in battle? Trust me, you're gonna want confident soldiers, because confidence yields results. Further adding to this, Geshu Lin fights on the front lines with his men, so it is even more imperative that he maintains his image as being the symbol of victory and strength to cement his troops' morale, no matter the conditions they face. Any facets of himself that reduced his chances at winning, he buried, because defeat is an outcome he cannot accept, especially when the consequences can be so devastating. Maybe in the past he shared a personality more akin to Jian's, and was far more happy-go-lucky. But with the many battles and numerous casualties in each, I suspect it jaded him into the man we know now. Hell, maybe Geshu Lin did have connections as vast as Jian's, but they all perished during the war, which bolstered him to become even stronger, no matter the cost, for the sake of winning and never letting that happen again. However, as inhuman as his character may appear, I theorize that this is still all a brave front that he expertly wears. So yeah, I'm saying Geshu Lin wasn't completely numb to everything. My biggest piece of evidence? Look at his eyes. Yes, when they glow, he's like a wild animal that's about to f you up in the night, but that's not the point I'm trying to convey. Look specifically at his eye bags, a feature that people also find attractive about him, unfortunately. Eye bags come about from a lack of sleep, and how can one sleep peacefully when they're worried, stressed, hell, tormented over the numerous deaths under his command, stressed over the next battles they will have to face, worried that he's not doing right by the many who have fallen for his cause. Thus, I suspect whilst he appears to be the embodiment of strength, in actuality, he's still very human to everything, but he just hides it all, alone. Oh, that reminds me, remember how I mentioned about his willingness to sacrifice his soldiers? Originally, I attributed it to him simply being cutthroat for the sake of efficiency to prevent the pace of battle from slowing down. But I think I can dive a bit deeper. Referencing again his conversation with Jian, he points out that as soldiers, they fear, they bleed, and in the end, they'll all die on the battlefield. As if for a soldier, it is expected that they die, but not a civilian. Hence why he would rather gamble the lives of all his soldiers than a single civilian. Whew! Me, I have been talking a lot. But now that I've fully covered everything in terms of what we can speculate with the Geshu Lin we know now, I think it's time to theorize how he could come back. Many others, including myself, believe it makes the most sense if he returned as being a Threnodian Resonator, namely the Threnodian Resonator for Overthrax. Back in 2.0 and 2.2, when the whole concept of Threnodian Resonators was introduced and confirmed, that really set off the alarm bells for many of us, because it just makes too much sense for Geshu Lin to come back this way. For starters, Overthrax is the Threnodian of war, and which Resonator do you think embodies war best? Geshu Lin. Now, how would this even come to be? To be fair, I'm still thinking about it. What's a reasonable way to explain someone coming back from overclocking after gravely wounding a Threnodian? At the moment, I'm thinking the involvement of a relevant third party, like the Fraxidus, or some subsidiary working with them, I don't know. Since the Fraxidus probably revived the Overthrax prior to the story's events, when they noticed it being struck down by a normal-ass non-sentinel Resonator, I bet their interest immediately peaked onto him, because along with reviving Threnodians, the Fraxidus also want to recruit powerful allies, and Geshu Lin looks like easy prey. He's a powerhouse whose own country forsook him. Perfect. The way I see it playing out post Geshu Lin's explosive strike, the Fraxidus find him barely alive most likely. And then, once bringing him back to their labs, they'll probably try and revive him first of all. I'd say dude was so badly injured, he's probably been unconscious for most of these 3 years, hence his disappearance. Because think about it, this guy gravely wounded Overthrax when it was in its prime, and he's not a Sentinel Resonator. I know I've mentioned this point before, but it's really that important, because we've seen how powerful Thenodians can be, and it's hard to fathom just how much power is needed to even wound one, especially from a non-Sentinel Resonator. Thus, I fully suspect the degree in which Geshu Lin overclocked is akin to that of Gon's transformation from Hunter x Hunter, whereby he probably summoned all the power he'll ever have just to cut down Overthrax. And thus, the consequences of this could have turned him into a vegetable. It wouldn't even surprise me if there were more consequences too, like amnesia, or a new permanent mutation to his body, like his right eye going black. Yes, this could be another reference to Kamu. Whilst he's recuperating, maybe the Fraxidus will attempt to do some experiments on him in their attempts to, I don't know, artificially make him the Overthrax's Resonator or something? Look, if Geshu Lin is able to handle a Thenodian, I'm sure the Fraxidus will eye him as a qualified candidate to handle all their nasty little experiments. Still, the specifics of how they'll connect Geshu Lin to a Thenodian is a bit iffy to me, but I just strongly feel Kuro Games will make him one. Maybe Overthrax did want to link up with Geshu Lin, but it thought he was dead, so it didn't. Just because they battled doesn't mean Overthrax hates Geshu Lin. Honestly, it could be that it actually respects Geshu Lin now, and if it does get its hands on him, it'll probably insert its weird strings into him like it did with Dreamless. Now, when Geshu Lin does come back to the story, I think it'll make sense if he's a temporary antagonist. How that'll happen is if he is successfully manipulated by the Fraxidus or Thenodian, likely by them using the fact that Huanglong resents Geshu Lin to turn the man against his own kinsman. Or, if we're wanting to do this without the real world toxicity, he'll just be brainwashed by them. Hell, maybe he'll just get triggered in seeing the sorry state of Jinzhou because now a little girl is their magistrate, making him think, what the fuck did I give up everything for? But I don't think he'll be a permanent antagonist because, in spite of everything, I do not believe he'll ever yield to the ones he had hunted so long for. If not for the Fraxidus, there would be no Thenodian to fight, and thus, no need to be the crazed general he is today. He could have lived normally. Ooh, actually, you know what would be really cool? Remember that old lady who lost her son in battle back in 1.2? Or the little girl from Encore's companion quest who lost her mum in battle? What if their deceased relatives were part of Geshu Lin's division? And then it's in seeing them that returns Geshu Lin back to his senses. I know it's a stretch, but like, that'd be a really cool connection. There's genuinely so many ways I'd like for Geshu Lin's return to go in the game. For example, get him to one-man army all the 1.0 Resonators. Or maybe have him go at Overthrax for round 2, but make it more of a redemption arc kind of battle, because this time, he's not alone. He's got the rover with him. But ultimately, the direction of Geshu Lin is in Kuro Games' ballpark. I'm just here to yap and theorize. Now, before we end the video, here's some quick-fire miscellaneous theories I have. Credits to someone in the Wuthering Waves Cafe Facebook page, but someone theorized that Sanhua and Geshu Lin could be siblings. This is due to their similar designs. Grey hair, dark clothes, beaded accessory, expert fighters. Maybe the two are part of some ancient warrior clan or something? Another theory I have is around the true form of Geshu Lin's sword. Near the end of the storyteller's cutscene, Geshu Lin's sword burns out to reveal a more thinner form, which reminds me of Ichigo's Zangetsu turning into Tensar Zangetsu. Maybe the big thick form of his sword is actually just a shell that contains the blinding power of the real one, hence why the big sword was cracking apart. Furthermore, when you look at the leaked image featuring the very early Geshu Lin, you can see here that he was designed to have a long but thin weapon in mind. I mean, sure it could be a placeholder, or maybe our boy's gonna be wielding a long sword, not a great sword, and in turn, it'll change up his fighting style. And finally, another theory I have is around Geshu Lin's bloody ascension to general. Remember how generals of the Midnight Rangers often led from behind enemy lines? I theorized that when Geshu Lin was just a foot soldier, his wanting to fight on the front lines might have come in part from his show of a general he had before. Maybe this general was the type that completely ignored strategy and simply threw every Midnight Ranger at the problem. I don't know. But to stop this toxic leadership, Geshu Lin might have killed him, having had enough of his former general's bullshit. Still, I feel that this is all a little less likely of a theory because a mutiny within the Midnight Rangers is something that we should have known about since 1.0. Still, this is all just theory crafting, so it's a nothing burger. Oh, moving on to the last thing I want to talk about, shipping. You might be groaning.
This guy ships people. What a fucking loser.
Look, I know the activity gets a bad rep because some people will literally wish death upon you if you don't agree with their headcanons, but personally, I do like to ship characters because it's fun to think about and cute to think about. So as long as you do it healthily, it's whatever. Have fun, bruh. And yes, I'll consider both hetero and homo couplings. Whilst I'm personally hetero, although I'm questioning that thanks to Geshu Lin and Henry Cavill, among others, I like to vouch for everyone. So obviously the strongest ship for Geshu Lin is with Jian. Like, come on. You have the whole dynamic between the two, being opposite sides of the same coin. Even the trailer really lands home their conflicting love. Jian's probably the uke and Geshu Lin's the seme. Yeah, BL lovers, the ship can work. I'm not denying that, alright? You got it. But a small ship that I weirdly champion a lot is Chang Li x Geshu Lin. Hear me out. Let's look at it from an aesthetic point of view. The strategist x the warrior. The flames that warm and guide versus the flames that burn and destroy. I'm pretty sure they're like in a similar age range too. Same generation type beat. And I'm certain during her days as Secretary General in Ming Ting, she has definitely heard of the escapades of Geshu Lin during his battles. I've already theorized Geshu Lin losing some of his humanity for the sake of his bloody war against the Thenodian, so perhaps that is where Chang Li can come swooping in. Just as she helped Jinzhou's magistrate, she can also help Jinzhou's hero. You see my vision? Come on, this is a ship that can work. It can work! Now that I've covered absolutely everything I wanted to talk about, we've come to the end of this video. I do not know how long this all is, but come on, if this doesn't show I am Geshu Lin's #1 fan, then fine. I'll commit to breaking my free-to-play and S6R5 him on release. In any case, if you made it to the end of this video, I'd like to extend my hand and shake yours because you too must be a Geshu Lin fan. Or maybe you were entertained by my rather passionate way of theory crafting. Whatever your motivations are for sticking to the end, you have my thanks. And well, I can't really tell you to subscribe because these kinds of videos I don't really do. Ever. But I simply love this man too much, so I guess I'd be really grateful for a like. Honestly, I prefer comments though, because I want to ignite some discussions, correct my theories, bring your own theories. I want to know all your thoughts with my theories because I love learning, especially about Geshu Lin. And you can learn by looking at things at different angles or with new information. Furthermore, I'm a tiny creator, so I'll easily be able to read everyone's comments. Anyhow, I hope you guys have a great day. Happy birthday, Wuthering Waves. I love you too, Solon and the Wuthering Waves team. And yeah, Geshu Lin, we're waiting for you.